So the very first thing I'm going to want you to do is open up an architecture template. That's what I have here. And I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Save As, and I'm going to go to Save the Project File. And on each one of your student folders on the network, there is a folder under 25501. And so if I was in Jake's folder under exercises, there's a folder that's called massing. And I want you to save this exercise in that particular folder that I put out there for you, okay? So I'm just going to go back a couple of steps and put it in my own folder. So that very first thing I want you to do is go in there, and I want you to save this as massing exercise underscore with your initials. Okay, that's the very first thing I want you to do. And I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to free you all up, let you do that, and then we'll start recording again. Okay, so now that you have that saved, what we're going to do, the first thing I'm going to have you do while you're in here is recognize something about massing. Massing by default isn't turned on in Revit. If you go over to your View tab and you go to the visibility graphics or type in VG or VV on your keyboard, if you go down here, you'll see that massing by default is turned off. Now, I'm not going to turn it on here because I want you to see something. What's nice about that is that with massing, if you go to the Massing and Site tab and you say that you want to put an in-place mask, or you want to place an instance of a mask, look what it's always going to tell you. It's going to say it enables it. By default, I want you to remember that it's off, right? So I'm going to say close, and it says no mask family is loaded in the project. Would you like to load one now? Yes. By default, no masses come loaded. So where do we have to go under here? Naturally, we go to what? To mass. And under mass, they have what are called the basic mass primitives. Now, I'm not going to bother loading them all. You can make some of these easily yourself. We'll see obviously how to do that. Most people do. They'll use the in-place mass function. But just know that there are some of these massing functions that might be helpful to you in the primitive form. Okay? And if you look at these, those are the common ones that are in there. So, I can load one. I'll just load the box one, and I'll hit open. And once I put it in there, you will find that massing, you will often start using massing in your 3D view more than anywhere else. You see it now, and you can see I can change the width, the height, and the depth. So if I wanted to change the width, I could change that to maybe 40. It comes in as a perfect square. Now you see if I applied it, right, there's what that one looks like. I can change the width of this back to 30 feet and maybe change the height to 15 feet, right? And I'm not going to see that much in this view. That's why with masses, I often like to go to a 3D view, and I can see how those masses are used, or what they basically look like with the difference in the height and depth. I can click on this mass and I can say that I want to do a number of things. I can, usually with the primitives, you will adjust those things here. However, you can edit the mass family. Now, I don't want you to do this, okay? But this is the family that comes with Revit. I don't want you to edit that family because that's a basic family that comes along with it. Typically, you'll use these masses as a way to build other things in Revit, these basic masses. Most of you will rarely use the primitives though. Most of you will use what's called the function on Massing and Site tab, In Place Mass. When you click the In Place Mass, you can call that mass something like Mass 1, okay? And when you click on that, now what you have is an opportunity to start drawing an actual mass in your project. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I come up to the line function, right, and I start drawing. Now, one more time, look at that. Look at where my placement plane is for that. You'll always have to focus on that when you're drawing masses. Where are you actually placing this mass? Well, by default, it's level 1. I could put it on level 2, or as we'll learn later, we can pick a plane to put it on. So I'm going to click level 1, and I'm just going to start drawing some funky odd shape. Okay, and there it is, right? And now notice I can move the grips on this however I want. I'm still on that work plane, but once I hit finish mass, right, it says mass contains no solid geometry, no floor's volume, so it won't be computed. So really it's nothing, right? It's nothing. Once I go in here and hit edit in place again though, what I want to do is select all these lines and watch how my ribbon tab at the top changes. Now I can say create a form. And by creating a form, it says either you can give me a solid or a void. For right now and mostly today, we're going to work with solids, but we will look at the void function too, because the void function is very helpful as well. So I'm going to say make this a solid form. And now it just by default throws that solid form, but look what it gives me. It gives me an opportunity to move that form up, down, off in one direction, and even off in another direction. Notice how I can change that plane by clicking on what? Clicking on the specific direction I want things to go. Either the X, Y, and Z, the X being red, the Y being green, and the Z being red. But notice how I can change that actual form in that instance and just kind of play with my mass. And then I can say finish mass, and now if I hit SD on my keyboard, I've got a solid mass, right? But that mass is now dynamically editable by just moving the faces around, okay? So I'm going to free you up and I'm going to give you a moment to create the line work for your mass, whatever you want it to be at this moment. But then what I want you to do is to actually grab that line work, create a solid form, and kind of play with the features and the function of editing that form dynamically. Because notice I can edit this in place, right? And edit the different faces, and we'll talk about this as well, because this dynamic editing becomes a lot different and can get a little confusing once I've created the form. So I want to be sure that when I create that form, and I'll just do that one more time, again I'll come in here to massing and site, in place mass, and again it'll default to mass 1, and this time maybe I'll create what? I'll create somewhat of an arc, right? An arc portion, and then maybe I'll, create one more arc, and then maybe I'll create a line here, a line here, and a line here, right? And I'm at level 1. I can now say create form, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I've got to select my lines, and then I'll say create a solid form. It by default throws one out. 20 feet is typically the default of whatever shape you've drawn. And now you can dynamically move that object, okay? Before you start using the X and the Y, right, be real careful, because once you get out of that shape, you've changed the shape, right? So it can be challenging to get it back to the original shape if that's what you're wanting to do. So go ahead and play with that function for a few minutes, and then we'll pick up in the next video.